Hello, I'm Llewellyn King, the host of ME CFS Alert. Today it is my delight to be able to introduce to you Ovid Amitai, CEO of Solve ME CFS Initiative. Ovid, welcome to the broadcast. How long have you occupied the executive chair at the charity?
I joined Solve in June. So this was already during pandemic time, and I think we all have a distorted sense of the time since then. So it's been about 9 months now, but it seems like a lifetime.
You yourself are a doctor, but not a doctor of medicine, but a doctor in pharmacology, correct?
Yeah, I'm trained in pharmacy and pharmacology, and so my view has always been interested in human health, but primarily from the perspective of trying to look for therapeutics.
And how come that you're now running an organization devoted to ME?
Well, my professional work has been focused primarily on developing therapies for rare genetic diseases. These are diseases that are based on hereditary basis. And in doing that, these are typically very small communities. And so I've always worked very closely with patient advocacy groups and patient support groups. And that was the part of my job that I've always cherished. And I knew that at some point I would be interested to work more closely with patient advocacy and patient groups. Then I heard about Solve, and as I was learning more about this disease, it actually became very personal. And I felt that this is something that I really wanted to apply my skill set and experience, and with the hope that we can have better diagnostics and treatments for people who are affected by ME/CFS.
Solve raises money, collects money, and directs research or gives the money to researchers. How is that going? How are your endeavors? Are they going well? Are you getting the money to do the funding you would like to do?
We would like to do more. I think that our organization, I feel, have really gained the trust of the community over so many years. And so we really have an enormous support from dedicated people who really have been supporting us all along. I think that we are now at an inflection point. We really are at the point where we know that we could do much more. And of course, we need greater resources to do that. And part of it is because of COVID-19. I think that we now begin to see what a post-viral syndrome could really look like and help us understand potentially ME/CFS. So there's a lot more that we could do if we had the right resources.
What are you funding? How would the community be able to see the result of this work? Is it across the country? Is it specific? I know you're doing work up at Harvard, at the Harvard Medical Center. What else and where else?
Yeah, so actually one of the most important aspects of Solve supportive research has been through a program that we call the Ramsey Grant Program. And this program was specifically designed to bring people to this space to apply their scientific experience, scientific know-how into the field of ME/CFS, but people who are not particularly involved in that kind of research before. So we would like to increase the number of people who really look at this disease from a scientific perspective. And this grant program is really, we call it a seed grant program. And the idea is to really encourage people to come in and see how they can help all of us based on their knowledge, potentially make breakthroughs. So that's really open to everyone, and this could be around the world. Researchers from around the world has benefited from this program over the years. And at this point, we have about a network of about 60 researchers really throughout the globe who were not involved in ME/CFS before, and now they are part of this network. So that's one program that we're very proud of.
It would sound to me that introduces the possibility of a lot of compounds, drugs that have been developed for other diseases that might be tried on ME, off-label uses of drugs that are extant and have other uses.
Yeah, and I think that's one area that I think should get more attention. And and frankly, I think at this point, what we begin to see is that there are many similarities between some people who had COVID, and they don't really fully recover. These are the people that call themselves long haulers, also known as long COVID. And this really begins to look very similar to what we know about ME/CFS in terms of the symptoms that people experience, primarily fatigue, post-exertional malaise, brain fog. These are the things that really people complain about. And so I think what we're about to see is a greater interest to apply some of these compounds that were developed potentially for other indications. We'll start to see them being tested in long COVID. And then I think that would be really important to make sure we apply all the experience that we've had in ME/CFS as a community to advance those programs. And so I think that we're about to see a much greater interest than we've ever had in applying these kind of drugs, both to long COVID as well as to ME/CFS.
This should all be a lot more possible with artificial intelligence, shouldn't it? Isn't it possible for one to delve into the inventory of developed drugs in a way that has never been possible before?
Yes, absolutely, and I think that my perspective, and I'm a relatively newcomer to this world of ME/CFS, but when I think about what I've seen so far, I think it's very likely that there are some subgroups. In other words, we call it ME/CFS the same way that we talked about cancer or specific kinds of cancer as one disease a generation ago. But we now know that there are subtypes within those diseases that are based on genetics or other factors. So this is exactly the kind of information that using AI, using big data sets, I think that's exactly where we can begin to see some of the patterns. And that actually is the other part you've asked about, the kind of research that we support. Solve has been very active in developing a research tool that we call the registry. And the registry is really just a repository of information. That's really what it's meant to be. It's meant to be a big data set that then you could do exactly what you described, which is to apply artificial intelligence to begin to look for some patterns. What could be the subtypes that would suggest a common treatment would help them. So these are exactly the kind of things that I think we're going to see more and more in the coming year or two.
The government is allocating, I think, $1.5 billion for long-haul COVID. Are you going to get some of that? Well, because the government has always been very, very modest, and indeed has only contributed in very paltry sums towards ME research. I think it's gone up slightly in recent years, but for the longest time, it was $5 million a year. 1.5 billion is orders of magnitude larger. Do you think this will be helpful to you and to the community?
I do, and we have been very involved in advocating for additional funding for long COVID, that could be applied for ME/CFS. And I think that has happened. So there is now money that is dedicated specifically for NIH research. And we're going to be involved with the community to make sure that the ME/CFS experience is brought into the picture, and make sure that it will benefit both communities. Because there are a lot of similarities, and there's a lot that's been learned in ME/CFS that could be applied to COVID, and the other way around. So this is, I think it's a tremendous, it's hard to use the word opportunity because this pandemic has been so tragic. But from a research perspective, this is really a unique opportunity. And, one thing that's very, very interesting in this context is that we now have with COVID, there's a single trigger. We know that those people who are not recovering had the same infection. And we can actually follow what happens from the time of onset. And understand what happens in their immune system, and these are really the kind of scientific leads that we never had.
But they are not the same disease. Long haul COVID is not myalgic encephalomyelitis.
Well, we don't know that. Of course, we don't know that they are the same diseases. But I think that when we see some similarities or suggestions, my sense is that that should lead us to action. We need to do the kind of research to understand what is similar, what is different, and either way, that's going to benefit both communities and lead to a better understanding and with the hope of for specific treatments.
Do you think that it will emerge that ME is somewhat like cancer, that there are many diseases under the umbrella of ME? We have for some time included myalgic encephalomyelitis, other things, fibromyalgia, for example. Do you think that may be a different way of looking at ME as being many diseases under the same umbrella with the same or overlapping symptoms?
I personally do. I think that's what I think that's what we'll see. And, I say that because for many years I was involved in research in what we call monogenic diseases. These are genetic diseases where only one thing goes wrong, which is, mutation in one gene. So that should be probably the most homogeneous diseases that you can think of. Nevertheless, there's a lot of variability. And so I think I've learned through that even those things that we call, we use one name to describe a disease, there's often specific subtypes. And once you understand them and characterize them, that really holds the potential to lead to a breakthrough in treating them. So I think you're right. I think that's exactly what we're going to find out. We just need to apply the right tools to be able to do that. And I think we're now really on the verge of being able to do that.
What is the situation with ME in minority communities? If you walk into any ME meeting or go on the web and look at people who are posting, it's all white people like you and myself, and no black people, no brown people. Is this because of bad reporting? And should we have an initiative to reach into those communities? We know that COVID has been devastating, terrible in those communities. And we don't hear anything out of those communities, or very little, dealing with ME.
This is such an important question. And, I think that starting with the first part of your question, I think that for ME/CFS, what we know, at least in our organization, and as you said, when we look at the community, it's primarily white and it's predominantly women. Now, the gender part could very well be a biological reality. And we see the same pattern, by the way, in long COVID. We hear more about women who are affected by long COVID in the same way that we do for ME/CFS. So there could be some autoimmune component. It is very well known that autoimmune diseases where the body generates antibodies against its own cells, that is something that is more prevalent in women. So that could be part of the explanation for that. But in terms of race and ethnicity, I think this is just, these are the biases of our system. And I think that we must work very actively to address that. And in this context, our organization is committed to do what we can to expand beyond what has been the outreach so far. So we're doing that with the registry. We're trying to partner with other organizations because we know that our reach is limited. But I think that for this year, this is one of the specific goals that we have, which is to have a better understanding of that question and really do whatever we can to increase health equity, particularly in ME/CFS.
You have a partnership on COVID, right?
Yes. I have to give a lot of credit to people within the ME/CFS community who very early on, a year ago already, were concerned that post-viral disease will be part of what we see with COVID-19, and unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening. And so we felt that this is something that we should be working on for the same reason that we talked about before. Our community has really suffered from dismissal, from disbelief, from neglect. And we wanted to make sure that we can embrace people who had COVID and don't recover, so they don't have to suffer from the same treatment. And so we partnered with other organizations. Some of those organizations come from organically from the COVID community. We're partnering with other ME/CFS organizations and other diseases, adjacent diseases, and we formed the Long COVID Alliance. And this is really a coalition of organizations, individuals, all working to apply their knowledge, their experience to benefit the Long COVID community, but also make sure that helps our community as well. So this is a partnership that has just started, and we really are looking to work together to address all those concerns that we just talked about.
The first hurdle with ME has been diagnosis. There being no easy diagnosis. You cannot take even tissue, but you certainly can't take bodily fluids and find it. Can you with COVID?
So that's one of the opportunities, is really to do that, is really to look in real time, to look at people who had COVID and follow and see what happens. And I think we begin to see some early evidence that there are some immune changes in the immune system that are different for people who had severe COVID, for instance, and those who become long haulers. And so there are differences in the immune response. We can think about them as different fingerprints. And these are exactly the kind of things that we now can study. And I believe we'll be able to apply what we learn to ME/CFS.
For most ME/CFS sufferers, getting the disease is a life sentence. It stays with them with true horror, endless days of suffering, stretching to the horizon of the time of that life. Do you feel that maybe the long haulers are facing the same kind of life sentencing?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question. I think that what we learn, and that's true for most diseases, and certainly for ME/CFS, is that intervening early on, perhaps within the first 2 years, does have the opportunity to change the course of the disease. Beyond that, there are probably other secondary changes that at that point are probably not reversible. But there's a window of opportunity probably to make a difference. And therefore, we feel that this is the time to act. The time to act is right now. And and frankly, if we had done our homework all of us, meaning, the government agencies, the medical community, if we invested more in the experience of ME/CFS, if we understood how to manage post-viral diseases better than we do now, we would have been better prepared for this pandemic. So that's true for other parts, but certainly there could have been lessons from ME/CFS that we could apply today. But this is just to say that there's probably a window of opportunity to make a difference, and therefore we need to study and do it now, with the hope that not all the long COVID people with long COVID really become, as you said, have a lifetime sentence.
Ovid, as a pharmacologist, and this will be our final question, as a pharmacologist, what do you make of some people who get some relief from some medicines? Ampligen comes to mind, which is very important to some patients. It's an off-label use, I believe, because it hasn't been through approved clinical trials. Or people who get other relief from other things, other medicines, or even other practices. What do you make of that? What does a pharmacologist make of that? The partial solution that isn't a whole solution and is limited to people exposed to it. Ozone is another one that comes to mind.
Yeah, so as a pharmacologist, I look at these data and I tend to believe those who are benefiting. And again, going back to what we just talked about, there are probably subsets of people, and therefore I can absolutely see how for some individuals a particular treatment would be helpful or it wouldn't be helpful to others. I think our job is to now better study that, and there are some very interesting experiences in the past in drug development where if you just looked at the entire population, let's just take breast cancer, for instance. Herceptin, which is one of the most effective drugs that are used these days, in the initial clinical studies, only helped about 20 or 30% of women. But once you understood what was the reason, which was a genetic reason, you could exactly understand why it helped these women, and therefore for them it was 100% success. Overall, the study failed because the entire population didn't benefit from it. But I think that what we need to do now is to look for those cases where success could really become a lead for us to understand what may be a useful treatment.
Ovid Amitai, CEO of Solve ME/CFS Initiative, you're a wise and informed man. It's been a very stimulating interview. I'm sure that it will give a lot of comfort and enthusiasm to the community. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you very much.